Welcome to Detroit Motor City's Self-Driving Cars 101 presentation, The Near Future of Autonomous Vehicles, with Carla Balo and Scott McCormick. My name is Jamie Taralunga, and I'm the Midwest Region Co-Leader. If you're unfamiliar with Self-Driving Cars 101's global organization, then I'd like to introduce you to its founder, Doran Tsuberi.
Yeah, you said it just right. So thank you for the intro. And, guys, I'm just like all of us. I've been experienced this tsunami of Zoom events over the last year. And the best events are those where, we get to the main course as soon as possible without too many introductions. So I'm just going to take 3 minutes. As Hannah and Jamie asked me to do, to sort of introduce self-driving cars at large, and then I'm going to fade out into the audience to listen to Carla and Scott giving today's presentation. So I'm a self-organized Tel Aviv branch of self-driving cars one-on-one for the last 4 years, and self-driving cars is a sort of it's not a typical meetup theme in the sense that it's not a specific profession, it's not a specific technology. It is really this use case that funnels into it a multitude of expertise, disciplines, technologies, and so forth. And from the very beginning, I was referencing other meetup groups dealing with the same subject, and it became very clear to me very soon that each of the different groups is taking the shape of its members and taking the shape of its location. And in each location, actually, the angle, the approach, and the experiences of the folks are sort of different. The San Francisco group would be very much about technology. A group in Washington, D.C., for example, could be all about the safety and regulations. Sorry about that. So it sort of makes perfect sense to join hands and create this sort of network of meetup groups where every group brings in its own color and unique expertise into the mix. So self-driving cars one-on-one as a network is just this extra. It's an additional layer of value to the members of the communities. I'm not going to present anything. I'm just going to encourage you to go into selfdrivingcars1on1.com. We are putting everything in there to make it convenient for everyone to reach out, to explore the other groups, to see the presentations of past events, to watch the recordings of past online events, and so forth. So I'm going to leave it with that. Do visit selfdrivingcars1on1.com. We made it just for you. And we are also eager to get your feedback about that and get your ideas and, your desires for additional things that we could do for you over there. And with that, I'm going to conclude.
My name is Hannah Osborn, and I'm one of the co-organizers for the Detroit Motor City Group. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from two of the leading authorities in the AV space. They're going to teach us about the current status in autonomy right now and the path going forward. So along this path, there are many obstacles and challenges, and I would encourage everyone to pay particular attention to what these challenges are. Nothing is insurmountable, but these are the areas where we're going to see the really interesting things happening. So for anyone that wants to have a voice or contribute their idea, to identify these opportunities is going to help you understand where you can have an impact. So if I have one takeaway for all of you today, it's to really understand what we're working on and where you can contribute.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. So we'd like to thank our event sponsor today, which is important. CEO Bastian Beauchamp has been very kind and generous to sponsor our event today. We're coming to you live from the Abbey Rose studio. And at this time, we'd like to introduce Carla Balo, President and CEO of the Center for Automotive Research.
It's great to always share the stage with Scott. He and I have worked together a number of times and supported each other's conferences. So I'm going to try not to kill you with PowerPoint. I have a lot of slides. I'm going to go through this very, very quickly. And you're going to see a lot of elements interwoven here. It's not just a presentation about autonomous vehicles, but it also talks about the mobility ecosystem and a little bit on electrification, because all of this comes together very, very nicely when we look to the future. Just a little bit about the Center for Automotive Research. We are an independent nonprofit that produces research to promote the sustainability of the automotive and mobility industry. We do this in 3 ways. Mainly, we're a research organization, but we also host events, the largest one being management briefing seminars, or MBS, held every August. And we hope to be able to do that in person this year, but it is a hybrid, in person and virtual. And then we also are very good at bringing together multi-stakeholder communities for connections and discussions and networking. So let me first start with what happened in COVID. What happened in mobility with COVID? We saw, increasing trends and decreasing trends. Overall, a decrease in vehicle miles traveled. Of course, a decrease in the spikes that we normally see. Public transit and ride hailing also decreased. A lot of people working from home. A lot more commercial usage of delivery vehicles. And then bikes and micromobility also stayed very strong. And who's buying today's vehicles? It's not young people. It's and if you look at this, new passenger car buyers, new light truck buyers, and you also are able to see new SUV, CUV buyers, which are eclipsing the market right now. You can see that it's the age 60 and above, especially on the trucks and SUVs, similar on light trucks and even passenger cars. So what I'm trying to say here is there are probably going to be a lot more modes of mobility coming in the future because affordability of our vehicles is getting less and less. Most people think after the pandemic, they're still going to be working remotely or in some form of hybrid. I've even seen later studies where up to 90% of people are saying they expect a hybrid environment in the future. And that's going to change how we use vehicles in the future. We know that commuting time will decrease. We don't know what's going to happen for social and recreation. What we've seen is a huge increase in people driving for vacations, people avoiding airplane travel, a lot more motorhomes, trailers, etc. But we don't know. We have to see what will happen really in the future. It could be crazy too. Everybody wants to see each other. Shopping. Things have changed and they're not going to go back. People have gotten used to having things delivered, gotten used to doing things out of their home. Shopping and stores in general face a very precarious situation in the future if they're not ready to be digital. And then we also don't know about school, medicine, religious services. We really don't know what's going to happen in the future. But again, some of these trends are likely to stay consistent because people have used them and they found out they work. So when we talk about this ecosystem, it's everything in the case world: electric, connectivity of vehicles, automation, and then the new mobility: ride hailing, bike sharing, car sharing, micro mobility, everything that's part of this new system. Of course, we can't eliminate public transit. And some of the communications that we're already seeing, and these are growing by the day, are the various applications for, we already had Bluetooth applications, but Wi-Fi hotspots, using your phone to unlock and start your car. Telematics are becoming very, very important in the insurance industry. And this is just going to continue to grow and grow as cars get more able to use the various communication standards that are shown here on the left. So I want to talk just a moment about SAE levels of taxonomy, because these are recognized throughout most of the world. And everything up through level 3, the driver is still the primary fallback in case of emergencies. Only when you get in level 4 and 5 does the system actually take over fully for these conditions. The difference between 4 and 5 is 4 is geofence, and 5 means the vehicle can just go about anywhere. Most of the products on the roadway today are 2+, although level 3 is being introduced in Japan by Honda. That project is starting fairly soon. But otherwise, what we have here in the US anyway is level 2+. And this whole page was put in because I don't think we can underemphasize that automated vehicle systems are not automated driving systems. And this shows even through level 2, the driver still has to be alert and aware. And we can spend a lot of time talking about nomenclature and customer behavior, which is a big part of this, that as an industry we need to face as we go forward. And this all has to fit into this mobility ecosystem. Everything has to be able to communicate. Everything has to be able to have its own space and safe space to be able to coexist together. People with different needs, be they paratransit needs, single person pods, all of this needs to be able to coexist safely in the future. And the way to do that is with connectivity and automation. But we have to realize that it's not going to be one size fits all. Different solutions are going to be required depending where you are. So let's look at some of the mobility as a service, things that were starting before the pandemic and more that have been announced since the pandemic and during the pandemic. We see a lot of these currently in contained campuses or contained areas. The campus circulators or the employee shuttles offered by May Mobility, by Navaya, by Easy Mile, by Local Motors. And now we've seen a lot of partnerships starting between different grocery stores or delivery services and products like Neuro and others to again begin to see if there is a way to do this safely. And our prediction at CAR is that we're going to start seeing a lot more autonomy first in the area of delivery of goods in these closed campuses, in senior living communities, so that these different edge cases can be studied and we can ensure that the safety exists before deploying this technology out further. I mentioned before that solutions vary with local context, and I really can't say that enough, because a lot of people think that I've got this great technology, I can deploy it anywhere, it can be deployed the same way in any municipality. And when you think about that, you really have to understand the problems of that municipality, or understand the problem that you're trying to solve, what the demographic looks like. Is it urban? Is it rural? Is it suburban? Is it ex-urban? What is the climate like? And not only that, but what's the culture of that city like? Because only if you understand those and probably many other elements will you be able to come up with a mobility ecosystem that's going to be used by all, and at the end of the day, give people an alternative to vehicle ownership, which as we move into autonomy, new policies, reducing congestion, you really want to give people a seamless solution to owning a vehicle, one that fits into their everyday life, one that doesn't cause them any grief or any problems. Infrastructure design is really, really critical as we look at this, and a lot of pilots are now being made. We have a great one happening in Michigan, done by, or at least being studied by CAVNU. You know, what should the roadways of tomorrow look like? And we're only going to understand this better once we actually start to manufacture some of these. And some of the old, principles that existed in Europe to have, clear areas for people, clear areas for vehicles. And then what we've seen in certain municipalities of eliminating car lanes and putting in bus lanes. Our solution in the US has always been, let's just keep building more roadways. And every time we build one, we fill it up. But we have seen cases, especially during the pandemic and even before, where we said we're taking away roadway so that this can be a bus route, and traffic actually decreased. So it actually worked in reducing some of the congestion. So we have to think differently about how we do our infrastructure. When we think about a smart city, you want it to be livable, workable, sustainable. This is what's going to grow economic growth. This is what's going to make people want to live in your city. And all of these elements, you have to be able to take all of this data and analyze the data. So it's only smart when you can get all these mass quantities of data, and there's a ton of it, from urban planning all the way through to your sanitation systems. And you need to have this connected network of sensors, devices that has to be built, and it has to be continued to be maintained. You have to be continually learning it, understanding how that life is changing, because it is an actual real life. It's not static. At CAR, we've created something called the Mobility Web, where we've taken all the different automaker partners, and then shown how they've connected with non-traditional suppliers in one of the areas shown at the bottom of this chart. Similarly, with the mobility subsidiaries that they've created, again, it's mainly to demonstrate how vast this ecosystem is and how much support and different ways of thinking are required to create all the new modes of mobility. This simply shows the timeline. If you would have said in 2015, if you'd have looked at this in 2015, you would have seen everything in black to the left of 2018. You can see now that it's shifted significantly towards 2021, 2022, and rightly so. Autonomy is not easy. There are technological issues, there are policy, there are insurance, there are liability issues, and nobody's going to launch something before it's time. The only one doing a level 4 right now is Waymo out in the Tempe area. And they actually are in a geofenced area, and everything is being handled remotely. So that's one of the outstanding demos and pilots. I don't want to go into this too much. The only thing that we show here in the timeline are those that had a promise of deployment, and then actually where we are today.
Oh, thank you, Carla. You're fantastic. Yes, at this time, we'd like to invite Scott McCormick, President and CEO of Teleoperation Consortium and President Connected Vehicle Trade Association.
So this is sometimes called Scott's dark side presentation of autonomous vehicles, because I'm going to talk about what the actual reality of it is right now. This slide we have in there in case you can't fall asleep at night. I would like to thank Important Safety Systems for sponsoring this event. They are a member of the Connected Vehicle Trade Association. CVTA is an international nonprofit that was formed in 2005 at the request of the 12 largest automakers. And if you want to find out more, you can go to connectedvehicle.org. I'm going to kind of bring up a couple other topics that aren't in the presentation to add to what Carla said. One of the things that's important with the pandemic, and I just received at the end of last quarter the results from the National Transportation Safety Board, the number of accidents and deaths on the roads in 2020, and they actually increased. Even though there were substantially less drivers on the road, their statement was that they believe they increased because the drivers were having more risky behavior. They were driving faster, and the type of driver that was on the road was more prone to misbehavior to the rules of the road in any case. This chart is kind of to pair off of the chart that Carla gave, because we looked at what was going on in 2015, And we looked at all of the things that had to change. Besides, we had to look at the legal protections and the technology and the infrastructure and the standards. And as you see, I'm not going to go over the detail of the chart because these will be available to you after the presentation. But right now, between 2020 and 2025, we have a number of things in all four of those categories that have to advance. This is the timeline that we put together and actually in 2018, and it's currently still what's going on. We forecast the driver assistance features would get more sophisticated, integrating GPS navigation, that commercial trucks were the first ones to hit the road autonomous, and they were. There was a wharf in Shenzhen, China, that in January of 2019 actually was automated, fully automated, and went up and down the wharf. It only went front and back, but it had to clear spaces by as little as 2 inches. And then there was one in Spain, and then the one in the US and Arizona. And last year and this year, cars are going to be equipped with semi-autonomous features that'll be able to navigate through traffic lights and intersections and stop and go traffic, but they still require a human driver to take over. The next few years after that, we see that the semi-autonomous features should work in more conditions, like in rain and at night, which they don't work in now. But the automakers working on the tech are unlikely to spend more time bringing it to city streets more than they have already. They're going to be more focused on enhancing long commutes. And the reason for that is that they learn more about the systems on long commutes than they do at all the edge cases that are in the cities. By 2025 to 2030, we expect to see most cars will have level 3 and some level 4. We also expect that sales will decline as consumers will rely on ride sharing or may share a car with multiple owners. Understand that the Google Prius currently costs about $340,000, and the Chevy Cruze costs about $140,000. So if I'm going to spend $140,000 on a car, I'm going to get a Lamborghini Alfieri. I'm not going to get a Chevy Cruze. And the automakers really don't want to sell you those cars. And the reason is that if they can create an automated car sharing robo-taxi system, instead of making $5,000 on the sale of a car to you, they can make $500,000 over the life of the vehicle. And we expect by about 2045, all cars being produced are automated and none are likely to be owned personally. Now, understand that we in the United States only replace 15% of our cars 6.7% of our cars every year. The average person in the United States keeps their car for 11.5 years. So the average age of a car is over 5.5 years old. And when you look at the fact that we only replace 1/15 of our cars on the road, that it would take 15 years to turn over the entire fleet. Now, this is a chart that changes quarterly. It looks at who are the OEMs that are leading the connected and autonomous vehicle development. Right now, GM is basically leading in the execution. The industry also believes that Ford is leading in the strategy. Waymo is obviously working with multiple OEMs and providing some common framework for them. The belief of the industry is that Tesla is unlikely to reach level 4 without LiDAR. Using only cameras are inadequate to determine all possible situations. Honda and Toyota were lagging, but we expect to see a deployment from Honda and Toyota in Japan next year that will move them substantially up on the chart. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the actual primary systems that are available right now in the car, and there's 3 of them. One of them is adaptive cruise control down to a stop. Now, this feature builds on classic, basic adaptive cruise control, which has been around for decades, that maintains a selectable distance between you and the car ahead. Adaptive cruise that works at higher speeds is widely available, but systems that can function all the way to a full standstill are an important next step to manage bumper-to-bumper traffic. Then you have lane-centered steering. This goes beyond steering assist, which intervenes only as you approach or cross the lane markings, and often pinballs you back towards the opposite markings. To actively center the vehicle in its lane by tracking lane markings, the vehicle ahead, or some combination of the two. Such systems can often negotiate mild curves as well, but nearly all of them require you to keep your hands on the wheel, issue warnings, and eventually deactivating if they sense a lack of steering force. And just so you know, the Waymo cars that are operating in Tempe that Carla mentioned, none of them will make a left-hand turn. They will make 3 right-hand turns in order to get you to your destination because there are no lines painted on a left-hand curve through the center of an intersection for them to follow. And then there's hands-free steering. This centers the car without your hands on the wheel. In 2019, only two systems, Cadillac Super Cruise and BMW's extended traffic jam system, do this. Both of them require you to pay attention, and it's intuited by a driver-facing camera. Now, when we look at who is the closest to automated driving, the closest production car to that reality was going to be the new Audi A8, equipped with their new traffic jam pilot feature, and it was capable, allegedly, of navigating highway gridlock while you watch the morning news on the dashboard touchscreen. But regulatory hurdles forced Audi to sideline that system for the U.S. shoppers, at least for now. Cadillac Super Cruise hands-free adaptive cruise control has been available since 2018 on the CTX models. Unlike other autonomous systems, the car only functions on certain mapped roads with lane markings and in clear weather. Autopilot, Tesla's wide-reaching semi-autonomous driving system, although Tesla builds it as a hands-on-the-wheel system, earlier versions allowed you to drive hands-free for extended periods, but the automakers since updated their autopilot software, and it deactivates itself if it senses the driver's hands are repeatedly off the wheel or if they're off the wheel for more than 30 seconds. Now, all the automakers who sell vehicles in the United States have committed to having automatic braking on all vehicles sold in 2022. This map is of green is the current 130,000 miles of Super Cruise compatible highways. The blue lines are the 70,000 that should be added this year and next. Will give them a total of 200,000 miles, but appreciate that the U.S. has over 4 million miles of road. And Ford just announced that its Ford Cruise that would come out will be able to operate on 100,000 miles of road. They're almost entirely limited access freeways. Now, I'm not going to go into detail in the chart because I want to talk about this level 2 capability and level 2+. There are 131 models across 30 automakers that sell in the US that have adaptive cruise control down to a stop, and it's typically an option. It's more than 50% of the models out there. Lane-centered steering with adaptive cruise control to a stop is about 38% of the vehicles, which means that 228 models out of the 257 sold in the US, or 89%, have one or both of those capabilities. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the limitations we have right now. And that's that according to the National League of Cities research, only 6% of the US largest cities' transportation plans include any language on the potential effect of driverless technology on mobility. And given that timeline, that it'll take us till about 2045 until all cars are being made automated, there's going to be decades of people driving cars, intermixing with people with autonomous vehicles. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the problem with that later. In many states, and Michigan's a perfect example, only 20% of the roads are paved and marked well enough for an AV to navigate, or at least the current versions of autonomous vehicles. The maintenance levels on most of the roadway infrastructure are based on human vision, not machine vision. One of the most deadly things that an autonomous vehicle can do is attempt to cross a railroad track. Because if it doesn't have the arms that drop in front of you, it may know by a map that the railroad track is there, but it doesn't have the sensory capability to know if a train is coming. The other issue is that vehicle development is way ahead of public policy. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because we don't know what an autonomous vehicle will eventually be. And the other thing is that self-driving cars in all studies that were done vastly multiplies the number of vehicle miles traveled. So we have a couple of challenges. And the reason I like to talk about the challenges is because these are where the business opportunities are. These are where the things that the industry, the ecosystems need that haven't been addressed yet. All vehicle ADAS systems currently react to road weather and traffic conditions. All autonomous vehicle sensors capture movement, changes, intersecting threats, and react to avoid them. With vehicle communications and the machine intelligence to process that information, the vehicle could know in advance of a potential problem and threat and preventatively adjust speed, course, and trajectory well in advance of the specific problem location. Communication provides for an awareness of the upcoming problems and the potential problems in it outside the sensor range. This gives the vehicle more time to react, the ability to focus sensors to the likeliest threats, to process the data quicker with substantially less hardware and software. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what the actual capabilities of AVs are. The state of the art in machine intelligence is nowhere near adequate to take over driving in any road weather traffic condition. You and I, when we drive, we make all sorts of conscious and unconscious decisions about other drivers. We look and see if someone is perhaps an older person that's not as alert, or we have a pickup truck that's not using its turn signals, or somebody else that's texting when they're driving, and we modify our driving behavior. The vision systems and the machine intelligence on all AVs simply detect whether the object is stationary or moving and what its trajectory is if it's moving. So when we look at machine vision systems, they have many limitations. They work very poorly at night. They don't work in weather, in fog or rain or snow. Simply speaking, the human eye is a subjective device. This means that your eyes work in harmony with your brain to create the images you perceive. And it's processed instantly. A camera, on the other hand, is an absolute measurement device. It's measuring the light that hits a series of sensors, but the sensors don't. And the signals recorded need to be adjusted to suit the color temperature of the light illuminating the scene before it can be sent to the processor for processing. Only one autonomous vehicle has audio receivers. Every other autonomous vehicle on the planet is a deaf driver. Now, isolating the proximity and direction of another car blowing its horn or screeching its brake in a chaotic audible environment is extremely difficult. More importantly, when you hear that, you take evasive action. But taking such evasive action, even if the car can determine a threat, is extremely complex. And we don't give machine intelligence the ability to do that because it's what we call an assertive act. So the world needs technical innovation to allow these vehicles to hear. When I drove here on the expressway, I drifted off the side of the road, but I could feel the rumble strips. There was no line there because it was worn off, but AVs can't feel road variations. We need to embed biometrics, passenger-facing cameras, a dialogical AI to monitor and interact with at-risk drivers. When we talk to people and say, would you use an autonomous vehicle? They say, well, no, but I'd put my grandmother or my great aunt in it to take her to a doctor's appointment. Well, we can't do that right now. Because if that person has a stroke or passes out or falls asleep, the last thing you want that car to do is show up at the doctor's office, open the door and have the body roll out. So we have to be able to monitor those patients and be able to interact with them. We also need faster machine intelligence to react to all of those environments above. And we have to have machine intelligence to know how to interact with chaotic humans. We don't have any expectation that the cameras are going to start watching the other drivers and making decisions, but we do, from edge cases, know that certain things occur that we can then program to how to react to that. A classic one is what we call budging. And you've all been in it. It's when 2 or 3 lanes are merging into a single lane. Now, I'll pull forward, you'll pull forward, I'll pull forward, and eventually one will let the other one through. And that's because one individual has asserted themselves over the other one. But if a human being sees an autonomous vehicle, they're very opportunistic. For the most part, they know the car is going to have to stop, so they just go on ahead anyway. We need much better and cheaper vision, radar, sonar, and LiDAR. And we need test and validation methods for all aspects of the autonomous vehicle performance. We also need a substantially better automatic braking system. A study by the American Automobile Association in 2019 found that in tests at 30 miles an hour, none of the test vehicles avoided a collision with pedestrians, and they tested every car that had collision avoidance. In the daylight, the car traveling at 20 miles an hour only avoided a collision with the pedestrian 40% of the time. And when encountering a child darting from between 2 cars with the vehicle traveling at only 20 miles an hour, a collision occurred almost 90% of the time. At night, none of the systems detected the adult pedestrian. And we lose about 6,000 people every year from pedestrian deaths. It's about 16% of all traffic deaths. So in summary, for all cars, connectivity is a necessity. All automakers have some efforts underway to add levels of automation to their vehicles over time. Connectivity allows us to move from reactive safety to preventative safety. Given that there's no clear path forward, having the automakers with different strategies and implementation paths is going to bring about the broadest understanding of what works. Moving autonomous functions from dry, flat, well-marked roads to those with varying road and weather and traffic conditions is a monumental task and will take years. And the last thing I want to talk about is the charging infrastructure. If we converted every car in the United States to electric, it would consume 25% more energy than the entire country generates. We expect to see the internal combustion engines be dominant for years because that charging infrastructure doesn't exist. Some places can use solar, some places can use hydro, but most places are running off of nuclear coal-powered plants. And when we look at that, when we start looking at, well, what's the opportune source? It might be hydrogen. Not to put hydrogen as the power cell in a car, but to have hydrogen fuel the charging systems to take the load off the grid. Thank you very much.
I want to thank the speakers again for being so generous with their time and their knowledge. As I mentioned before, we had two amazing speakers that are just at the forefront of this industry, and for them to share their learnings and bring us all up to speed of it is just, it's an amazing opportunity for all of us. I'd like to thank all of our members for joining us as well. I hope everyone got something valuable out of this event. Again, feel free to contact us at any time. We're on LinkedIn. You could reach out through the Self-Driving Car 101 site. Be sure to check out Carla's new book. We have a book discount code for everyone that attended the event. We'll make sure to send that out one more time. And thanks again to our event sponsor, Important. I highly encourage everyone to go to important.com and see the important work that they're doing to protect vulnerable road users and increase the safety of AVs and connected vehicles in general.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. That's too word. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate you joining, and we hope to see you at our next event next month.
Thanks, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. And then just one last bit for our next event. We just want to let you know that we will have Larry Burns joining us. It'll be an interview style. Larry Burns advises organizations on the future of mobility, logistics, manufacturing, energy, and innovation. And you can also expect that my voice will be back 110%. So thank you for the support, Stephen Lawrence. I appreciate you. Give me those tips on laryngitis. All right, everybody, take care.